Okay, it's another Sunday morning. We are still reading White Magic. We are on Rule 4, starting at the very beginning of Rule 4. If you actually have a physical book, it's page 125. And I don't know what it is on an online text, but one can certainly find it. This rule, which actually is the middle in the number of the 7, if you will. There's 3 above, 3 below. So 4 has to have certain significance, and it looks like it because we're talking about sound, light, vibration, and the form, blend, and merge. And thus the work is one. And that is the same description that you actually have when you're talking about the initiatory process, when you're talking about putting all 7 levels together, because you work your way up from level 7 to 6 to 5, and then you'll make your 3rd initiation on the 5th plane. When you're done with that, you've moved to the Buddhic plane. That's level 4, exactly what this is rule 4. And then there is the 3 levels below you that you worked your way up to. There are 3 levels above the Buddhic plane, which are now going to, in a sense, give you a download. You're not working your way up that. You've moved out of the realm of consciousness because your creation of consciousness was to get you up to the level of meeting the soul in full consciousness, and then moving on upward in terms of this linear diagram that I have. So when we talk about sound, light, vibration, and the form, blend, and merge, that is the process that occurs here. And thus the work is one, because for the human's journey, he does his work on level number 4 on the Buddhic plane. And so the form, blending, and the merge, and the work is one, is a description also of that process. It proceedeth under the law, and naught can hinder now the work from going forward. And everything does proceed under the law. Those are the requirements you need to meet and understand and incorporate into part of you if you're going to move forward. Everything here has a design, and the design comes from above, if you will, if you're looking at that chart, and the sets of laws and rules. And it's a matter of learning them, being able to maneuver with them, moving upward. You hit level 4, you hit the Buddhic plane, and there is nothing that can hinder you from going forward, because you're not in the same electromagnetic field, the lower 3 dimensions anymore. You're in a different ballgame where you do not have that hindrance. The man breathes deeply. He concentrates his forces and drives the thought form from him. So this is the creative work of sound and the science of the breath. Before centering our attention upon this rule, it would be well to recollect certain things so that our reflection on the rule might proceed with profit. He's very efficient, isn't he? First, the rule we are at present considering concerns work on the mental plane. Okay. So you're not doing this work on the physical plane, and you're not doing this work on the astral plane. or the plane of emotions. And before such work is possible, it's important to have a developed mind, a well-nurtured intelligence, and also to have achieved some measure of mind control. Now, just so people understand a little bit about the very edges of mind and probably mind control, a lot of times, especially if people don't read a lot, when they sit down to read, then all these other things show up in their mind because they've sat down, they've relaxed a little, and they're going to read whatever the book is. And then they find that this idea and that idea and something else that they didn't do or something they should be doing shows up in their mind while they're trying to read what's in the material in front of them. These are the thought patterns, or maybe a little less desires, if you want, which would be astral plane, that you have set in motion that have not been satisfied. So they're still whirling around in your aura, haven't been let go of, either because you keep bringing them back and don't let them go to go achieve their objective or get the job done, or it's, oh, I should be doing this and I should be doing that, but you don't really want to do them, so you never do, but they're still floating around there. Once you settle, all of that comes back saying, okay, now you can deal with me. And I'm second in order, and I'm number 3 on the list, and they just keep showing up. Those are unresolved patterns you've set in motion that you just haven't satisfied to a point where you can dismiss them. So when he talks about a measure of mind control, a lot of people, I think they kind of, that happens to them, but they don't necessarily understand why. That all this stuff comes floating back in. So when you want to clear your mind, then you have to clear those things that you set in motion by a resolution, however the resolution satisfies you. These rules are not for beginners in the occult science. They are for those who are ready for magical work and for the labor on the plane of mind. And he will say elsewhere also that the work he works with, the goals and objectives that are set to be accomplished with this material happens on the mental plane. It's not going to be happening on the astral plane. And his goal, when you work through his agenda, and now I'm encapsulating all 20 books as his agenda in all its various levels, is to move you to that Buddhic plane, from whence then you can deal with the spiritual triad. So love is the great unifier, the prime attractive impulse, cosmic and microcosmic. But the mind is the main creative factor and the utilizer of the energies of the cosmos. So love is really the union of spirit and matter. It is that activity. When that union is made, we call it consciousness. And we are creating consciousness, I would expect 24 hours a day, on one level or another. And that is our job. This is what this body is made to function and operate mechanically to create consciousness. And physics of consciousness describes that quite well. But the mind is the main creative factor because it has the ability to direct energy. And the utilizer of the energies of the cosmos. Love attracts, That's the union of spirit and matter. But the mind attracts, repels, and coordinates so that its potency is inconceivable. And even when you get to twin dimensions, and he talks about our senses and how we have created with them. That's why his subtitle is Inventing Time and Space, because we have done that. We don't realize it. We just think it's out there and we can see it. And so therefore it exists. But he elucidates that we created it. Which is something to think about. That puts you up there on the mental plane anyway. And so when he says the potency is inconceivable, it truly is. We are just on the edge of another level of that inconceivable when we go back and we look at what Bucke said in his Cosmic Consciousness, that humanity is now at the very edge of bringing that cosmic consciousness into our world. He wrote the book 100 years ago, but he said it's just 1 or 2 in millions that have this experience at this point in time. It's just dawning on humanity, just like seeing colors dawned on humanity at some point along the way in various levels. Because I think Aristotle, they had 4 colors then. Now we have 7. Some people now can see more than that. And they see auras and so on and so forth, and the various colors, which I believe are considered to be more vibrant for the ones who can see them. But the coordination and so on and so forth that he talks about here, when you're up on that mental plane, and the potency is inconceivable. It's going to take you any and everywhere that one could ever go as a creative force to create the pathways. But we're just on the edge of getting a glimpse of our interaction with the cosmos when we talk about that cosmic consciousness. But then it's a cosmic awareness. Is it not possible dimly to sense a state of affairs in mental realms analogous to what now is seen in the emotional? Can we picture the condition of the world when the intellect is as potent and as compelling as the emotional nature at this time? The race is progressing into an era wherein men will function as minds, when intelligence will be stronger than desire, and when thought powers will be used for appeal and for guidance for the world, as now physical and emotional means are employed. And that's a great idea, as long as the evolutionary path going forward has incorporated the concept of love. When you go up into that mental plane, there has to be that progressive blending that includes care and well-being of the planet and everything on it, or else you get minds that don't have any regard for humanity. And he does indicate that. He said there can be very brilliant minds that have no idea or awareness of their soul, don't even know it's there. And so then they have a little bit different focus than the well-balanced mind that has the capacity to have effectively grown through the earlier stages and, you know, recognizes the value of humanity. Maybe that's the best way to put it. And the quality of humanity. Therein lies, in this thought, a profoundly necessary incentive for the right understanding of the laws of thought and a correct instruction to be given of the use of the mental matter and the building of that matter into thought forms. These rules concern themselves with this information. The second necessary recollection is that the worker in magic and the potent entity wielding these forces must be the soul, the spiritual man, and for this the following reasons. Only the soul has a direct and clear understanding of the creative purpose and of the plan. So what he's talking about here is that there is, for this planet, on a planetary level, planetary consciousness has a purpose and a plan. Only the soul, whose nature is intelligent love, can be trusted with the knowledge, the symbols, and the formulas which are necessary to the correct conditioning of the magical work. So there is the quality of love that I was talking about that has to be developed enough so that it can be trusted with the knowledge, the symbols, the formulas, which are necessary to correct conditioning of the magical work. So the knowledge is already there. The symbols are there. The formulas are there. And they are the ones he's implying need to be used here. Only the soul has power to work in all three worlds at once and yet remain detached, and therefore karmically free from the results of such work. So the soul, we know, is on the third level of the mental plane. And below that, you've got the lower part of the mental plane. You have got the astral plane, and you have got the physical plane. And us, each incarnation that the soul chooses to give, functions in those three planes. We function in the mental, we function in the astral plane, and we function in the physical plane. Our body is capable of operating and interacting with all of everything that's down below the soul level. That's its contact. That's why the soul incarnates, because it needs something else done down here now. Whether it's on one of those levels or it's a synthesis of those levels, whatever the soul's objective for incarnation is why we're here. And he does talk about the soul as the true initiate. It's not us little people here running around with these component parts plugged together for a while, thinking we're king on the hill or something. And so it indicates the soul is karmically free from the results. So we can incur the karma here. And that gets carried with us till it's resolved over time. But the soul is not paying the price. The only price it's paying is it's stuck where it is till we get there, till we have worked. These little appendages they send out, they're incarnated lower level, if you will, has to work its way up to the consciousness, the soul level. That's our first goal, to really go, and that's what's got to happen on the mental plane. But prior to that, What we do down here, we're going to resolve ourselves in various lifetimes, but the soul is not paying the price for that. We are. So if you want to build good karma, you just be kind and nice to people and have positive interactions. That's your fastest way up that elevator. Only the soul is truly group conscious and actuated by pure, unselfish purpose. Only the soul with the open eye of vision can see the end from the beginning and can hold in steadiness the true picture of the ultimate consummation. So they talk about at the third initiation where you do reach that level and you are conscious on the same level as the soul, then there is a merging of that awareness, that conscious awareness. And that's the key to your being able to move forward up onto that Buddhic plane, making those connections. Those connections aren't even available to you until you have reached that point in terms of direct conscious availability. Doesn't mean that there's not a little bit of the ideology that'll come down like stardust every so often for humanity, so they can get a clue, so they have some idea what they're moving towards, and will help pull them up a little bit because there's goodness there and being drawn to those experiences. You can ask whether workers in black magic possess not an equal power, and he answers no. They can work in the three worlds, but they work from and in the plane of mind and do not function, therefore, outside their field of endeavor, as does the soul. So in other words, they don't have the soul connection. And that's what he said. You can have very, very bright minds in terms of understanding construction of how things are put together here you know, and maybe look and be able to figure out the component parts and how a lot of them are connected. I think we're living through a lot of that right now, especially when we get in the field of medicine, so on and so forth. There's been a lot of research and ability, but that does not imply that they are on the soul level or have a clue. And they have no connection beyond that, is what he indicates when he says they can work in the three worlds, but they work from and in the plane of mind and do not function, therefore, outside their field of endeavor, as does the soul, because the soul has the ability, once that human gets there, has that interaction with them, to make the link to the bottom, the mental permanent atom, which is the bottom link of the spiritual triad. That's the entryway in. That happens at the third. That connection can be made because the soul has the ability to make that connection, because it does have, it's a larger world of endeavor. So the other guy doesn't. He can be around here manipulating and maneuvering. And if you will watch what's going out in the world, there's a lot of, I don't know if it's fervor, excitement, I don't know what the word is, but it's the agenda being sold is, you don't have to die. We don't have to go through all that. We don't have to go through all those incarnations and make our way up, because we can live forever here now. That's one of the current patterns that's saying, and all we have to do is we have to figure out how to keep replacing our limbs and our vital organs physically. We can hook our brain up to some chips or computer or whatever, and you can live forever. And that's exactly what this sentence talks about, is they cannot go below the 3 lower worlds. So they're offering you more of the same. You know, we'll just keep your body going. But the life principle that is being offered when you have made a connection with at that third initiation, and you've connected into that spiritual triad. So you're now eventually going to be getting the downloads, if you will, from level 4, the upper mental, which is the level number 1 of the permanent mental atom. All of the energy that's on the Buddhic plane, all of the energy on the Atmic plane is what's available when the soul can make that connection. For anybody who is not at that realm at which he's talking about here, they have no access to that. And that is the formless world. That is the etheric energy operates there. That is not a matter of consciousness. It's functioning, the awareness now of that etheric realm, which is the upper portions of the 7 levels. That's what they function on. So if you want to figure out who's coming from where, all you have to do is look at the product they're offering you. And if it's nothing more than plugging you into a bigger brain, which is a reiteration of what's going on here, it might move faster. So you can, in a sense, make an assumption about time and where it's going if you're running down that route. But it's nothing new. So that's really your key. The life more abundantly that Christ talks about is not more stuff. Okay, he's talking about your ability to connect to that spiritual triad and consequently, eventually moving above that so that you truly have a cosmic connection. And if you follow that initiatory path to level 6, we had just talked about level 3, initiation 3. Now jump to 6, which is a multiple of 3, if you will. When you get to that level, supposedly, according to the material, they're asking you, all right, well, you've gotten this far now. You aren't going to be able to stay here much longer. So which pathway do you want out into the cosmos? That's literally what the question is. Where do you want to go and what kind of work do you want to do? But you're not going to be able to stay here. Blavatsky makes it very clear that it's a weary pilgrim that makes the full journey, but there is no place to rest for man on this planet. He cannot be a permanent resident. And that's now, go back to a minute where they're telling you, hey, you don't have to go through all that journey because you can live here forever. And that's contradistinction to this material also, because we are not here to live here forever. We are here to make a journey to evolve to a point where we can make a larger journey, because we've developed the consciousness and we can function formless with full conscious awareness. We don't need the body. So that's another key to look for when you see what's being offered to you here, there, or elsewhere these days.
Hey, Carla.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
When you talk about you're not creating consciousness on those levels, there's still how would you categorize what's happening there as awareness, or
You're getting a download of awareness, and that's why he indicates that when you have accomplished the third and you're moving forward, you don't look for meaning anymore. What does this mean? What does that mean? Okay, we look for meaning. And when we have event patterns happen to us, oftentimes we will think about, well, what does that mean to us? In other words, this happened, and what does that mean? Because we're balancing it off the entire synthetic history of our soul, that our soul is carrying around with us, of everything that's happened to us to this point, through however many lifetimes we've been around here. And so, and maybe it's Jimmy Cricket, maybe it's your conscious, your conscience, but it's what does this mean? And the evaluator is always against the sum total of your experience to date. Okay, he indicates when you have now moved after the third and you've moved up to the Buddhic plane, you look for events that might be considered having some significance, but not meaning, because you don't you're not evaluating that way. It's something that would appear more strongly, or appear to have something, but you can't give it meaning. You just recognize it's a significant event.
you've said we've had this conversation many times, and it took all this time, I think, for that to register.
Oh, believe me, it takes lifetimes for this stuff to register. Truly.
Yeah.
But the important key is becoming conscious of that, because once you have become conscious of it, you have a handle on it. It can recognize things, so on and so forth. It's just like when I talk about especially that energy of the Scorpio, which functions more in the collective unconscious, and the patterns that are set in the first 3 years or so are operating patterns until you become aware of them, and then you decide, does this serve my purpose anymore at whatever age or level you are, or do I want to change this? And the key to that is becoming conscious of the pattern that you're expressing, because the Plutonian ones you're not aware of. They were the patterns that came in. They are the ones that you imprinted, so they are what's normal. There's not anything seen as being incorrect about it or non-functional about it, so on and so forth, until you probably hit your 40s. And by that time you found out there's something non-functional about it, because relationships aren't working anymore, or this or that isn't working. So then once you become aware of the pattern, then you consciously can notice when you utilize it or not. You know what the results are going to be. It's a manipulative behavior, and it's non-current. In other words, it's old patterns, old data, and old mental modes and old emotional modes. And then you look and you say, does this serve my purposes anymore? Or is this what's getting me going right around in the same little merry-go-round, and I don't get anywhere? And nobody likes me anymore. And or whatever. And then you can make a conscious decision to make a choice. Otherwise, basically whatever mom and dad did was the pattern that you patterned, that appears normal. And until you're really in trouble with it, you have no reason to change it because it looks like it's working. The same with what you just said. Yes, you keep working with this material over and over and over to get to the levels where you're consciously aware of another element of the dynamics that is working and how it works. And then you can take a look and say, okay, well, with that awareness now, I might choose a little bit of a different path in terms of my routing to where I want to go, or being aware that, all right, well, when I do this, that probably doesn't really get me where I want to go. And they used to say, you hook yourself to a star or something like that, and off you go. It's all a matter of consciousness and becoming more conscious of the system we're in. That's all. It isn't becoming more conscious of every other human being and how to get along with them. It's being conscious of what this whole thing represents, how it's put together, and how do we interact with it. And what do we have to do to continue elevating ourselves on that chart? Because there's different levels of conscious awareness as you move up it, just like you just said. How many times did you say you've been through that?
Too many, a lot. Right.
Yeah, but it's almost peeled it layer by layer off, right?
Right. It's just the subtleness of it is where we want it to go. We want to stay in that subtle places. But then I think there's so much going on, sideshows, thoughts come up, patterns like you're talking about arise, and then you kind of lose track of that subtleness. And that's where that's what everybody says we have to go to. All of the texts, all of everything we know points to being quiet and still and subtle and all that. But I think there's just so much of a sideshow stuff going on that it's very distracting. But this is great.
Walker in Physics of Consciousness basically says it's about 99% noise and 1% signal. But also the thing that happens is when you initially read something, you read it with the consciousness that you have at the moment. And so the words that you see have a meaning when you're reading them, because you learn the words, and then you give it, those words, the meaning that you have at that moment in time. As you continue to build more knowledge in this case, in this given field, the meaning of those words changes. And it's just normal. I mean, a lot of times, if I want to use a word these days, I look it up in the dictionary to find out what it really means, because in the haphazard life we live, we slap a lot of meanings onto words that isn't really what the word meant. But it was a good overlay and we liked it because it fit our agenda. you know, and we're comfortable with that because we've settled in on that meaning for that word. So now you're peeling back the layers with this material. And there's a lot of it here. So nobody's going to unload where they are and go to where what this actually might be saying on one pass. It's not going to happen. So yeah, it takes some time. And that's the other thing that is part of the goal and the whole endeavor, is because as you peel back some of the other, as you start to put this material together, then some of those subtler meanings can get through to you that weren't even in your awareness before. It's like it's like I said to you before, you're still stuck in the Old Testament, meaning at the time that those materials were written, that was accurate information. That was the high point of that, you know, that culture or that human being. And it was a moving upward. But humanity has evolved. And now that we can make that connection with the mental plane, you're going to move faster. Obviously, your mind moves a lot faster than your emotions, even in terms of action. You usually have to express your emotions for it to really be, everybody to be aware of where you're at with it. But your mind can move from one thing to another because it's in the formless world, if you will. It's moving there. So makes a big difference. So we had avatars who came at every age to give the pointer, this is the way going forward for a particular given age. I'll just use the word age. And there were those who followed, there were those who didn't. Okay. But the important thing, at least I think it is at this point in time, is for us to follow the agenda of the avatar, or in this case, it was a actually homegrown human being who came and directed the way, which in this case was Christ. That was 2,000 years ago, but we move a little slow in terms of where we are. This material describes details of how he got there, because he wasn't around long enough to give us a lot of teaching of all the subtleties of something. He wasn't here to give you the lessons, all the lessons. You got generalities, and if he did give lessons, they haven't been given to humanity as a whole. So if he was writing stuff down, or, you know, well, they did parchment in those days, so you could document something. And I know that you know, there's the New Testament, but as far as following the avatars from eons ago, honoring them and revering them is one thing, but our physical body has the capacity now to function on the mental plane. It has the capacity to move up that mental plane. The body didn't necessarily have that 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago. Okay. It's grown, it's evolved. This piece of equipment has become more sophisticated, just like all of our microscopes have become more sophisticated than they were 200 years ago, et cetera, et cetera. So this is where we're at. That's what this material is all about, is helping you understand the journey that was taken and how to get to the promises that were made, that were given 2,000 years ago. Because we, for the most part, I don't think I mean, we've evolved from 2,000 years ago, but I don't think that many people are actively pursuing the actual agenda. It isn't just, oh, be nice and you're going to go to heaven. Okay. It's not that simple. So you'll go back, I mean, you'll wind up, the nice will be counted, it'll be recorded in your soul. But when you're wanting to make that breakthrough, there's more to it than that. Okay, Tom, let's hear from you.
Just trying to absorb all this, but if we could backtrack for a second, I just had get a quick clarification because we were talking a lot about the soul here. I know DK refers to the soul and the ego as being one and the same. Am I right on that?
Yes.
Okay.
And the word self, for that matter. But in his material, the ego and the self are interchangeable terminology with the word soul.
Okay.
Both of them.
Well, my question to that, and then I see a lot of chatter out there about, it just seems like people look at the ego as a bad thing, and it's quite apparent through these texts that it's really not. It's a required component in order for us to kind of move up and out and to develop that so that we can. And it just seems odd to me that there's so much chatter out there that make the ego seem like it's a bad thing that you have to avoid. Just have to avoid. So I just thought it would be good to clarify that, because a lot of folks out there look at that as something to not get involved with.
Right. Because they don't even know what they're talking about.
Right.
And I'm not sure I do either when they talk about their ego. Okay. The terminology would have come out with psychology because they are creating terminology, and I haven't really studied the fine details of what they consider the ego. What I do know is the soul is looking for control of your behavior pattern, if you will. It wants an alignment. In other words, it's looking for an integrated personality, which means that the physical, the mental, and the emotional can function as one unit. So you don't have your mental ideas are here, you're a screaming Mimi over here on the emotional level and totally out of control that could have the mind can't do a damn thing about, and you're supposed to, and the physical wants to be here, but it's going to go over there. There's absolutely no control. Soul can't do anything with that because it cannot even think about connecting with you until you can operate as one unit. And after those are coordinated, that your direction is towards the soul, and it's not direction against some old mosh pit somewhere. And I'm using old terminology because I don't know what those worlds are all about. But I saw that on CSI once, decades ago, that word. So it's not going to touch you until those are coordinated, because that soul has connection to all that energy that's in the rest of that chart. And if you're going bonkers and Mimi now and aren't coordinated, the last thing that you would want, if you understood what was going on, was to get any more energy to drive you more wiped out and wacko than you already are, that you can't control. And so that is the description that he talks about, is that you would be working lifetimes to undo the directions that you had going if they're uncoordinated, and you get surges of more real vital energy in there, because you will just be more of whatever those directions are, and they're not up. So you would have self-defeated yourself. So, but where I'm going with this in terms of your, when there is a coordination and when there is that alignment coming up with the soul, then the soul is the driver's seat. The soul knows where and what needs to occur next. But what is its agenda? Its agenda is to bring you up to it. And when it does, what's it going to do? It's going to separate you from other people because you're making a break and you're going somewhere. Okay. And generally the term that I saw most used, at least way back when, was, well, you're selfish. You won't do this, or you won't join us in doing that, or whatever, because you're separating from those behaviors that are down here on these lower levels, because the soul is drawing you up to it. It wants your consciousness to grow to the level where it can come in line with, on level number 3, a conscious awareness and recognition, and in a sense a union then, in terms of the soul finally has control of its vehicle. So we can go on this trip up, okay? But to do that, you're going to be pulling away from people. And so there's going to be times you say, no, I'm not going to do that, because you will internally know that's not right for you. Now, might have been right a year ago, 6 months ago, the majority of your life prior, but it's not correct now. And you say no, and they say you're selfish. Or it's your ego. You think you're better than somebody else, right, or you, whatever. So that would be the way I would see the connection of his use of the term ego as representing the soul and also the self, because again, you're collecting at that point this appendage here, you know, this body, this functioning operating unit that does create the consciousness. That's what you're here for. It's a piece of machinery, and he's pulling that up here to align so we can take another journey, a more advanced journey onto that Buddhic plane, onto the spiritual triad. And now, just like your 7 levels, you have 3 lower, the physical ones we're talking about. You have 4 that are etheric, and that spiritual triad. Now you will be connecting with the energy of those etheric levels, and they will become a component part of you. Okay, those are subtle. That is a download. That is on the Buddhic plane. And that's why they talk about it being significant, your awareness, because what's happening is you're becoming aware on those levels if you've made that connection and you're taking that journey. But and that journey has basically nothing to do with what's going on here. He will tell you that even on the 4th level of that intuition, none of it will have anything to do with what's going on these lower 3 levels. If you're getting the intuition that you're going to take a trip in 3 days, that is not the Buddhic intuitive plane sending you information. You're a little psychic on the astral plane. Does that help to?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Start? And you're going, and when that happens, you will go through people, but as far as, I don't know where which age you're talking about with the ego trips, but if they're on the younger ones, they don't even have a clue. They're just using some psychological term that Freud coined or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I see it a lot. And it's almost like they're misdefining both the ego and the soul. It's like, because you'll even see some stuff out there where people are like, listen to your soul, ignore your ego, or something crazy like that. So it's just like, right. I'm like, huh?
And I think what they probably believe their ego is you listen to your soul, not what your physical body wants to do.
Right.
You know, in other words, it's the contra direction. It's the battle of direction. But And of course, the sign that's considered most egotistical is Leo, because its symbol is the sun that reflects in this solar system. Okay, which is big, and it's shining out there, and it's affecting everybody. Obviously, I think we can't live if we don't have sunshine. If we didn't have a sun on this planet, we certainly wouldn't have the organic life we have on. So, so I guess I would say that, and that Leo type energy, that sun type energy just shines and says, look at me. You know, I'm shining on everybody. I'm making life better for everybody, you know, and a lot of people would see that if it's embodied in a human being as being egotistical, because you think you're more important than you are, or something to that effect.
Yeah.
I think that's the
Could be.
term that's fancying around.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah, no, years ago when I first saw this, that was an eye opener for me to see that the terminology ego was interchangeable with soul, as was the self, because then again, it's packing up your baggage, so to speak, you here, getting it together, getting it coordinated, and making that journey to the soul. And so a lot of strings that you've had attached to you with other people and their ideas and objectives, so on and so forth, you're going to disconnect some of those, because you can't go forward without them being disconnected.
Right.
Yeah. So, but at least now very clearly, I think after the bottom of this page, you should be able to recognize which journey somebody's suggesting you take. If it's to continue to stay here as you are, and we'll just keep giving you life extension services, so that you can not leave here. You know, that's the ones who are limited. Like he's saying, the workers in the black magic possess not the equal power. They do not have the access to that world beyond. So, and it says they can achieve from their proximity and identification with their working materials results more potent temporarily and more rapid in accomplishment than the worker in the white brotherhood, but the results are ephemeral. They carry destruction and disaster in their waste, and the black magician is eventually submerged in the resulting cataclysm. Well, we know of at least a couple of those cataclysms, right? One for the Lemurians, one for the Atlanteans. Yeah, when it just ends up going too far in contrary direction to the purpose and the plan of the soul and the planet. Let me even jump that to the planet. The planet knows its purpose, its plan, and where we fit in that agenda. And when we do a 180 on that agenda, or probably even 150-degree angle on that agenda, going in the opposite direction, it appears from the history of our planet that that the planet has a level of toleration of which it won't tolerate anymore. And so there's a dump. You know, evidently we had a Lemurian civilization that did not survive, and that we had an Atlantean civilization that did not survive. Okay. At that point in time, that the direction just could no longer be tolerated. They'd gone too far in contradistinction to this planet's purpose and this planet's. And we serve a purpose here. We do create the consciousness that is necessary for the evolution of this planet to get to a certain stage. And that's the one with because we're basically here building with our consciousness, our ladder to get up there. That's literally what we're doing. And it appears that from stories, I don't know anybody personally this way, but I grew up, a certain amount of my time was near SRF, Yogananda, and Self-Realization Fellowship in California. And then you had some of the yogis from the East, or from the East, come out here in the 60s, so on and so forth. And so they will have already gone through this. They incarnate, and at a certain point, what they call it a recapitulation. At a very fast pace, they can recapitulate their evolutionary pattern to where they were when they came back here. In other words, when they left, they were already, let's say, master for the sake of terminology. But they're born, but they recapitulate at a certain point when they get a little bit older. They don't do it, no, I don't think normally as a baby. The body isn't developed enough for that. But the recapitulation has to happen. And that was a question that had been given by friends of mine who spent a lot of time with Maurice. And it was a matter of, yes, you have to go through those stages, but you can fast track them when you've already done them at a certain point. And so then you can function here in a physical form with that level of awareness. But that generally is something that is rare percentage wise on this planet. Everybody else is still working on their way up. Okay, Donnie, let's before we go any further, what are you thinking?
My thought is this is deep stuff, but you're putting it into context and helping it make sense today. That's how I feel about it right now. It's for whatever reason, it's making a lot of sense.
Well, it's only taken a year or two, right?
Yeah.
Literally to be able to get down to this level to a point where it does make sense.
Well, specifically when you were talking about the mental plane and formlessness, I think it's very difficult to understand that by just reading the books without you having said, well, your mind you're over here, and then you're over here, and then to put it into context where when you're stuck in the physical, on the physical plane, you're only right here, right? That's you can only go as far as
your mind can take you.
Right. But as you're talking about it, it's easy to see. It becomes easier to see. Oh, maybe that's what's meant by a lot of this stuff. I think, right? That's what's meant by it.
Yeah, I mean, it is the mind, like he says. I mean, you can't imagine what's available. And you can't. I mean, those higher level ones, they knock your socks off. I mean, you can't even imagine.
Right. No doubt.
And Christ came and he might have elaborated more, but what we have for information is, concise little statements. But it can't even fire up our imagination as to what he really meant. We're really not quite that far. I mean, you really have to, what did they used to say? Hit you between the eyes or something like that, which is the ajna center. So I suppose that was appropriate for some of it. But your capacity, your potential, yeah, I mean, it's way beyond anything most people can even conceive until you experience it. You know, but
Well, it's interesting because DK says somewhere that he said if people knew where this goes, we wouldn't have the problems that we have, but because we can't know, you know, we've got all these issues, I guess, you know.
well, that's true. And let me put it this way, if you really knew where this goes, you wouldn't hesitate to spend more time going in that direction.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, the difference between where one is in these lower three dimensions and stuck in this electromagnetic field that's it's a fixed square, literally. And you've got to make the breakthrough through it, if you will. Speaking now, that's a little more like, well, the Masons got the square too, but so does astrology and so on. And we're on the fixed cross, if you will. And you need to get off the fixed cross and move to the cardinal cross if you get to esoteric astrology. You know, because you've got initiatory activity in the cardinal realm and the fixed realm, you're stuck. You're just going around in the same square box until you break through and start to initiate activity. So, but
Yeah, the
that's
cube folds out to the cross, right? Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I look at this and I think, wow, if they only knew what it was that was there waiting for them, you know, maybe not everybody would be so enamored with the phenomena, because that's what we're looking at. I mean, our eyes, we talked about this earlier, because your eyes read light and then decode it and give you what you see in front of you. Okay, literally. But that's this mechanism. It's the only one we got, so that's how we know things operate. It's the only way we know they operate. But there's worlds beyond this that are available to humanity. And that's what these avatars come along and keep pointing the way every few thousand years. I think there were larger blocks of time earlier because there wasn't much movement to be had until you really developed a certain amount of mental realm. Where now we've developed a little more of it, we can move a little faster if we want. So, so let us therefore remember the necessity of a correct use of the mind, and at the same time, let us ever hold a position beyond and detached from the creative work of our minds, desires, and physical accomplishments. So the creative work of our mind, which is lower mental plane, desires, which is plane number 2, the astral plane, and physical accomplishment is plane number 7, the physical plane. Okay. 4 words stand forth as one considers rule 4. First, sound, the formula or the word of power which the soul communicates and so starts the work. This word is dual. It is sounded forth on the note to which the soul responds, his own peculiar note, blended with that of his personality. And his personality is considered to be his physical, his mental, and his astral bodies, which have a ray structure. And that's considered his personality. The chord of 2 notes is the producer of the resulting effects and is more important than the set phrasing composing the word of power. And so we are talking about vibration. And we are also talking about at the end of a given lifetime, according to Annie Besant, it's the vibrations that get saved. Okay. You get to somebody like Franz Liszt, 1825. He was the man in Paris in those days, so he must have been more than a musician, probably a philosopher, et cetera, et cetera. And he had written to his mistress, or whatever role she played, a letter once that the musician had his closest ear to God. And in some respects, when you look at the music of a generation, let's take a look at the 60s and the music that came out of the 60s, at a point where you really had a descent of some of that Christ energy down into the astral plane. And I'm saying that because if you'd been there, you would see it and you would hear it. Like I said before, I think I had friends of mine, two brothers, arguing which one was the reincarnation of the Christ, because they were all looking for it. And it was on everybody's mind. You can't even recreate something like that today. That was that energy coming down that far. And how did it play out? Initially, the music. If you look at the music of any given time, you are seeing the vibrations that are playing on this planet at that point in time.
Oh, cool.
And then you have musicians who are picking it up. So, and from there, it'll go to the art. And the artists will and in fact, I'm not going to get all these terms correct. When Dolly was painting, and there was, I believe it was the surrealism at that point in time, of which he was supposed to be one. He didn't quite fit the agenda, but the surrealists were looking for a new form. They wanted to create a new form. Well, when you dig deep into form, I mean, we have a form. We all pretty much come out in the same form physically, with the same basic ingredients. But they were looking to break the structure that existed and create a new form. And that that was earlier. That was earlier in the 1900s than the music. But the point is, when you look under the art, the music, eventually the science, it plays out. There's a progression there. And it's a progression that fits right into that chart once you get deeper into it in terms of the various levels. And again, you're dealing with ray structures, which we are not studying here, and it's not used. But this is all integrated. It all works together. And it is like music being played. And every so often it has a refrain. You would see it if somebody did a serious study in astrology, especially with the outer planets and their relationships, not to us, but their relationships to each other. And because they'll bring in something into this world that's a little different, but we'll be able to recognize it. And as those relationships repeat, those planetary ones, every so often in time, it's like a musical refrain that just shows up, and then this gets ignited again, and we get a little more of that information, and then it goes away, you know. So, and he has a beautiful phrase somewhere in here on Sanat Kumara sending out these structures, rays and colors, washing our solar system every day, every morning. So sound is so key, the vibration, because they all integrate. That's what this beginning of Rule 4 talked about. It talks about the sound, light, vibration, and form blend and merge. And the work is one. So that's just at the head of Rule 4. So it's a creative work of sound. So on levels far above us, that creative work of sound is laying out the patterns for literally our daily life, if you will, which of course is a long term when it comes to the planet. I don't think it's going away in 12 years. So it's been around for a long time. I expect it to be around for a lot longer. It's still got a lot of growth and evolution to do. So let us therefore remember the necessity of a correct use of mind, and at the same time, let us ever hold a position beyond and detached from the creative work of our minds, desires, and physical accomplishments. 4 words stand forth as one considers Rule 4. First, sound, the formula or word power which the soul communicates and so starts the work. This word is dual. It is sounded forth on a note to which the soul responds, his own peculiar note, blended with that of his personality. This chord of 2 notes is the producer of the resulting effects and is more important than the set phrase composing the word of power. Herein lies the problem. To sound these 2 notes synchronously and with the mind focused. Herein lies a clue to the significance of the or the Om. In the early stages of meditation work, the word is sounded audibly, whilst later it is sounded inaudibly. This training in the sound of the Om is an unconscious preparation for the dual work of spiritual creation. The facility comes as an attentive aspirant accustoms himself to hear within his brain the soundless sound of Om. I would suggest here that students accustom themselves to work in this manner, sounding the word audibly and with much frequency at the close of the morning meditation, but emphasizing in the early part that close attention to the inaudible hearing, which will develop the sensitivity of the inner ear or the etheric ear. Because you see each sense, remember we were looking at senses and the different, we've got 5 for each of our 5 senses, we have 5 sublevels of that given sense. 1 for each level of the lower 3 worlds and the spiritual triad, because they merge at the upper mental with that physical permanent atom of the mental plane. So those 5 levels are what they're talking about, and the etheric is part of that. So the etheric ear. Later, when the personal note or sound is established and the inner sound is sensed, there can be a definite practice in blending the 2. This entails the closest attention and the power to perform 2 activities simultaneously with the mental attitude of attention to both. So it's just like eventually when you study this material, you it's new and you fill your brain with a certain amount of it, and sometimes it just hurts to push it in there any further. It doesn't quite fit yet, and you know, and so there's a push, but you're gonna get it. You're not gonna get it, and you're gonna lose focus, and the real world's gonna, this one here, not the real world, this phenomenal world's gonna take precedent a lot, and you're gonna, the other stuff is gonna seem to be gone at that point in time. But there comes a point where no matter what's going on, there's that other part back there somewhere in your mind that you just know is focused in this, the other worlds that are there, if you will. And it's just, it doesn't overtake what's going on here. You just know it's resident and you sense it, would be the best way to put it, I guess. But, and that is probably operating on its own audible level, going in another direction probably, or a receiver for that, but it's not overrunning the program that you need to deal with here on a day-to-day basis, but it's still there. Students whose aspiration is keen and clear would do well to face the issue where the magical work is concerned and study their aptitude in meditation and their willingness to proceed with stability and caution with the needed discipline. To facilitate this, I would suggest that any who are deeply concerned in the work should study and answer the following questions. In the light of their souls and of their higher selves, make reply. Do you feel you have reached the stage wherein you can eliminate the meditation form as you now have it, enter into relative facility into the state of contemplation, recognize the vibration of your own soul? That's the third one. Does the sacred word mean anything to you, and could you formulate clearly the reason you sound it? And are you anxious to proceed in this work because your personality aspires, or because your soul is beginning consciously to utilize its mechanism? And so that third one is, Tom, is a little bit of when, are you anxious to proceed in this work because your personality aspires, or because your soul is beginning consciously to utilize its mechanism? That's the one where I said that eventually that's going to happen. And when it does, you will take a little bit different focus. And that's when you say, no, I won't do this or that again, or no, I'm not going this direction or that, because you're now going in that pull on number 3, rather than going along with everybody else to do this, that, or whatever, because it may no longer fit.
You don't care about the in crowd and what they're doing anymore, or whatever the in crowd means.
Yeah, or it may be just a individual that you've spent a lot of time with, but now all of a sudden, hey, nope, not going there, not doing that. So
Understood.
So this would be different stages, I would expect, of your recognition of your connection, or your lack of connection, or your super connection, whichever stage you're at.
Mhm.
Because most people, I think he indicates, don't even have, I mean, they have no real, first of all, this word soul has been bandied around forever.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, I think historically you can find that documented in a lot of material that have been written for eons of time. But he does indicate that until you're having some kind of connection with it consciously, you don't really know it's there. You know, they're not, I think I saw one article where somebody in the last couple of years indicated, and this would have been more science, they could determine the existence of the soul somewhere in, I don't know, seated in the brain or wherever it was, but, or that the soul exists. So there, you know, it's philosophically and metaphorically and religiously a word bantied around a lot, helping us remember that we're supposedly got one, but who really knows? Because it ain't gonna say, hey, I'm your soul, listen to me. Anyway, you know.
Not that easy. Yeah.
If you don't, I'll give you a big headache. When do you want? You know, that doesn't happen. But the description of that connection is tagged to the word joy generally. So there's happiness, which is the coordination of the physical, the mental, and the astral together. If they coordinate, then you feel happy because first of all, now you're not torn apart in 2 or 3 different directions all the time, which is pretty difficult to be happy about anything at that point.
Right.
And that if there is a touch in with the soul, then you experience joy, which is a lot more of a euphoria than happiness, and has a certain really nice aspect to it. An elation, maybe would be a word. And then if you do, for some reason, connect at a higher level, they talk about the monad. I don't know if it's got to go to the monad to get bliss, but the nirvana or the bliss is when you've made it up another level. And I think the reason for that is because up there, there's nothing of what's going on here. So you do have bliss because none of this exists.
Right.
If you could take that touch in at least for a moment or 2 or 3, whoa, this is really nice, you know, but there's nothing there either in terms of functionality other than you just being and getting a contact with it. Because if you follow this, for the beings who make it to that spiritual triad level, this is where the hierarchy is, with the masters of each of the ashrams are on this spiritual triad level. And believe me, they're not just sitting on their butts there. There's work. So in other words, you just don't get done with this and it's over. So that's when I say the point of contacting that bliss. Because when I started this material, people figured if you got to the nirvana, then you just stayed there, like you were parked there, you know, you've made it and so on and so forth. You're here with the body, but you've made it, and it doesn't work that way. First of all, you resonate at that level. You can resonate with anything on that whole chart at any of those sublevels, because you got the matching vibrations of all of that all the way up, if you were up there. Okay, so like a tuning fork, you're going to resonate to whatever is around you at the moment. And if it's a screaming kid, you're resonating at that level. Okay, especially if it's yours, because you're going to respond to it. Which means you could be jerked out of the other very quickly because you personally are going to respond to that level. And it's just like people who may reach that nirvana, they don't stay parked up there. They'll move up and down that entire chart depending upon where the pull is from. But because if that was not the case and you connected with nirvana, you'd never be able to relate to anybody anymore, because you would be up on those levels of vibration. So if you could not traverse all of that, you'd be no way getting back. And that's not the case. You do. You'll play all the notes on that, all those scales of that 7 levels. That's how you got there, because you had to have them all to get there. And Annie Besant's the one that talks about that. So, and actually her study in consciousness explains that quite nicely. So. Tell me where I am again now.
In connection with this last question, right after that, number 3.
Okay. In connection with this last question, The question is, are you anxious to proceed in this work? Because your personality or your soul is beginning to utilize the mechanism. And I conjure you to speak truth to yourself and thus clearly ascertain the true position. The question lies between a man's soul and himself. And there's a key about speaking truth to yourself, because, you know, a lot of people in this work like to think they're farther advanced than they are. And if they really embodied that, I mean, it's one thing to project a little, but if they really believed that and operated that in that terms, they probably are stunting their own personal growth and development. Because the only thing that matters is your next step. No matter what the next step is, that's the only one that matters. But if you think you're 6 steps ahead and try to emulate that, then you're not taking your next step. So it really, it's important to speak truth to yourself. I would like to interpolate here a few words in connection with myself. Students can sidetrack their energies in idle speculation as to my identity. This is before everybody knew who he was. Of what moment is it? My province in relation to the group is to give needed assistance to those who seek to fit themselves for active work as disciples. So here we are with the word work. You don't, you're not shedding responsibility on this journey upward. You're actually gaining more responsibility and taking on more responsibility at every level. And that's why I'm saying, if you hit nirvana and you're sitting there and there's basically nothing that up there that's going on to anything here, then they either shoot you out the door if you legitimately got there and are functioning on that level now. And that's, like I said, initiation 6, doing a few more works on 7, and 8 and 9 is preparation to jettison off somewhere else, I guess. Because it's going to be work, and it's going to be more responsibility the further up the level and the journey that you take. So I am a disciple, and having progressed further along the path of return, and now that path of return is, I imagine Donnie has seen that involution chart that Blavatsky had. Okay, there are 7, it would have been the 7 rays, the 7 pathways into our solar system is how the life force that we are embodying and everybody else that embodies got here. That was the involution coming down. Now we're on the evolution again of going back up. We hit bottom a while back, and I don't know how long ago a while back was, but it was a long time. And we're going back up. But when we get to that level 6 and they say, here's your path choices, they're basically the paths of return. I think they've added a couple other choices or something now, but basically it says, I'm a disciple having progressed further along the path of return than the aspirants who study these instructions. So the path of return is we bottomed out way back when. We're now going back to our origin, but we're going back with consciousness. We've creating the consciousness. That's what we're here to do in this system, is create this consciousness. That's what these little machineries that we run around with do in terms of their relation with the planet. And ultimately, when we do, anybody who does get up to that level, level 6 and 7, it says, okay, now which path do you want to take out of here? That is the path of return. We take it in the solar system. if for anybody who accomplishes that completed journey, then they're out somewhere else. They've got to choose wherever else they're going, and they will have a relation with the cosmos now that we don't have, in terms of, and I say that because if you looked at the paths, they're listed back there. Some of them go to Sirius, some of them go to the Pleiades, some of them go to the cosmic astral plane or the cosmic mental plane, or one of them goes to the cosmic Buddhic plane. So we will have made the round trip, except we will have been developed into something that wasn't there when we started. And it's been a work and a journey all the way along. So nobody's going to be able to slough off here. And so anyway, that's that one.
There's also Earth service, right? That's on there.
Yeah, but eventually when the earth has been fully serviced as much as it can, I'm sure you got to go somewhere else again. So. But your path of earth service is different in as much as you consciously chose it. Your, our incarnations right now were not ones we consciously chose. The soul chose them. Okay. And there's a difference. And until you come to being consciously on the same level as the soul, because then that consciousness transfers to you as the entity, and you move forward. That's level 3. Level number 4, you decide that you do, and that will have taken some time between 3 and 4, because you're now getting connected with that spiritual triad and those qualities of energy, which are formless. And at a certain level of that transference, if you will, a decision is made that the causal body, which is the soul, the shroud of it, the soul, is no longer needed. The reason it's called the causal body is because up to this point, that is what caused you to incarnate. You did not have a choice. Okay. The soul determined when there was a need for the incarnation, and you were born and you're here. Doing your thing for however long the journey, this given journey is. And then you kick the bucket, so to speak, and all of that goes back into the soul. Whatever experience is here, that is collective, on and over and over and over. When you have built enough consciousness to get yourself up to that level 3, where the soul is on the mental plane, and you have those interactions, conscious interactions, which you have at that level, then, and you go forward with all of that consciousness as yours now, and not, the soul isn't sitting there still holding that. You have it and you're going forward. The determination on level 4 is, we don't need that soul body anymore now. And it's called the destruction of the causal body. Occurs at initiation 4. And then 5 is you step out of the, I don't want to use the word matrix because it's, but you step out of into the free world, if you will. You step out into the light. That's probably the best way to put it. And he talks about it in here, that he may have better ways of saying it. And you're free because you don't need a body now. You're fully conscious. You weren't before. You had to go through the death process, and then you're kind of shrouded up and you're in that soul again. There's lots of different things that people say about the interim period. So I'm not going to stand on any given one, but the bottom line is that you do not have that choice. The birth and the death are not your choices in the early stages. Only after that third initiation, when you connected with the consciousness of the soul, and now you have it. So you can be fully conscious without the need for a physical body. And then you join the hierarchy because you're now going to function on that spiritual triad. So the ashrams, so on and so forth. Other people who have done what you just did are there, because where do they go? You know, and so, and there's just more learning and more work and so on and so forth through those different ashrams. So, but the body that was the deposit, or the soul where you deposited all of your experiences as you're working your way up here, is empty now. You as a conscious entity have it going forward. So physically that there's a destruction of it, and then you are no longer tied to it, and it's not tied to you, and you are in the light. So I would expect that then you become aware of the levels of the energy, consciously aware and free into those levels of the energy that would be the Buddhic plane and above, depending upon where you're at. But you are, yeah, because in a sense, you know, there's less light here than there is up there. So you become aware of the difference. So where did I left? I'm the disciple having progressed further in the path of return. And the aspirant who studies these instructions knows somewhat the pitfalls, understands what is needed, and can aid in the preparation for the momentous moment when they pass the portal. Is more necessary, is not truth of equal value if enunciated by an aspirant, a disciple, or a master, or even a Christ. Mayhap the nearer I am to you, the greater may be my usefulness. My anonymity will not be broken. Okay. And speculations as to my identity are fruitless waste of time. Suffice it to say I'm an Oriental, that I am on the teaching ray, which is ray number 2, closely associated with Master KH, which is Master Kuthumi. That part of my work is the steady search for aspirants of strong heart, fervent devotion, and trained minds. And that I am a disciple, as are all, from the humblest probationer up to the greatest of the great ones. And that should be remembered. Is the disciple, as all are, from the humblest probationer to the greatest of the greatest. Everyone is important. One lesson all aspirants need to learn, and to learn early, is that concentration upon the personality of the teacher, hoping for personal contact with him, and constant visioning of that condition called accepted chelaship serves to postpone the contact and the delay and the acceptance. Those are just obstructions in mental matter to any breakthroughs, because that is your limited mental realm creating meaning about all that stuff, and it serves like, it's just like a wall. Because it was all created on this lower level where your mental realm was when it did that. So anything higher can't get through. Seek to equip that contact. Seek to equip your instrument, learn to function in quietness, fulfill your obligations and do your duty, develop restraint of speech and that calm poise that comes from an unselfish life motive. And that one's a key one, the selfish life motives, you know, and forget the self-satisfaction that might well up in the heart when recognition of faithfulness comes from the watching hierarchy. Give this instruction careful consideration. There are days wherein many adjustments and changes are being wrought in the world of men. In resulting confusion, individuals are appreciating the necessity for the uniting of their forces and for cooperation in their efforts, and the need for group work is more apparent than ever before. And you may be seeing those days right now. You know, what we're going through. In fact, Simon makes a great effort in his connecting consciousness to bring people together at this point in time when it's needed. I see what he does. I don't know him or anything like that, but I see that, and I know that there is a need for a lot of that understanding, and he has a certain focus on spirituality, and he's bringing a social group together that probably could experience a lot of being lost if they didn't have some understanding of what's going on right now. Because and now I'm not pairing what he's doing with what I'm going to say, but what I'm going to say is, as you move up this chart that we always are talking about, you move into subtler realms. As far as the mental or the physical realm, if a rock drops on your foot, you can see the rock. You know what dropped on your foot. It's there and it's tangible. When you get to the emotional realms, you might have situations where you're not sure whether that look somebody gave you was a positive or a negative. Okay, so you're less confirming that than you are that the rock dropped on your foot, because in the physical realm, it's apparent. In the emotional realm, it could go one way or another. Okay, when you get to the mental realm and you start experiencing these things on mental realm, more often than not, you're going to wonder if you just imagine this or that as some concept, idea, or vision floated across your head. Was that my imagination? Was that important? Did I really see that? Did it have meaning, and was it real? That would be the question. Was that real? Did it have something? Okay, because when you start getting into, and because that is the realm at which the information on the mental plane is going to come to you. It's going to come in a thought, or maybe a little vision or symbology, if you're a symbols person. But you don't have anything tangible. You can't go poke somebody and say, hey, did you mean that as a good way or as a not a good way? You know, so you can't get an answer that way either, because on the subtler realms, you're not going to know. Nobody's tapping you on the head, you know, or ooh. You have to figure it out for yourself. So it's subtler. And and something you have to eventually come to terms with, because even anything that might be significant that we talked about earlier will be significant in your mental realms. You know, it's not a rock hurtling at you anymore. Nothing that you can define in the lower three physical realms. So that is a different world. And so give this instruction careful consideration. There are days when there's many adjustments and changes are being wrought in the world of men. In the resulting confusion, individuals are appreciating the necessity for uniting their forces, for cooperation in their efforts, and the need for group work is more apparent than ever. These are days, and he would have been moving into the war here, World War II. These are days, therefore, wherein quietness and confidence must be your strength, and wherein the only safeguard lies in a close searching of all underlying motives. As seen on the surface, many apparently diverse principles emerge, and the surge of battle appears to go first one way, then the other. As seen on the inner side, the emerging factors are simpler. The contest leads primarily to a testing of motives, and through this testing, it is made apparent who in every group are capable of clear thinking, accurate discrimination, patient endurance, and an ability to proceed along the probationary path towards the portal of initiation, untrammeled and undisturbed in their inner life by the upheavals on the surface. And when you look at some of the smaller stories in the back of Cosmic Consciousness that were put there, that are actually people who were alive at the time, so their initials, they're generally by initials, and that they've had this little epiphany that he talks about, which is the early stages of what he considers cosmic consciousness. They have an experience. It can be a couple minutes, it can be a couple of hours, generally not much longer, I think he described. But they come out with their worldview is changed. In other words, they understand that everything is okay. No matter what is going on, everything is basically okay. And so they don't have a disturbed inner life after that. And it's a permanent change for them. It's not just for a few hours, but they understand that what they're seeing or what they're going through, they don't have to worry. Life is the way it should be, and it's progressing. And it's that inner confidence and understanding. Could you but see the unrest and difficulty everywhere is producing a good which far outweighs the seeming evil. Souls are finding themselves and learning dependence upon the inner ruler. When all outward props fail, and when all the apparent authorities differ in the solution preferred, then souls are thrown back upon themselves and learn to seek within. This inner contact with the higher self is becoming apparent in gradually unfolding degrees, and leads to that self-reliance and inward calm, which is based upon the rule of the inner God, and which therefore makes man an instrument for the service in the world. And one of the things that occurs as you move through these different levels of energy is they function differently. The lower realms that we live in are fire by friction. You know, we get the fires we need internally to survive by eating the food. And the food certainly experiences the friction in our digestive system, if nothing else. And we continue to operate. You take away the food and take away the water. You know, this unit doesn't operate well. You move up a level to the soul level, and you've got what they consider solar fire. And this one hums and purrs a little better than the fire by friction. And then the upper level close to the top is you've got electric fire. And then that's the one where you can even experience a bliss. So you're not, you're out of the realms of the fire by friction. You're out of the realms at that point of your solar fire, and you're in electric fire. And I suppose we see a little of that with electric cars in terms of less resistance and less friction within their operations of movement. And we have computers now that, operate. They're not mechanical in terms of having to have wheels and all of this other stuff grinding inside to make it happen. But your body, when you shift over, if you can make those connections, mellows out too, because it's no longer running on all that high friction. And I think what those people in the back of the Cosmic Consciousness book had a shift, jumped a level, and then they're not worried, and they're not, and life is far more mellow. They're not going to sleep, and just sleepwalking or anything like that, but they don't have all that internal conflict operating in the machinery itself. It's just being operated by a higher level of energy. Because down here in the lower 3 levels, it's more forces. You have to convert the food into a usable mechanism, so the forces within those lower realms can continue to function. Several things are apparent at this juncture in the careful, thoughtful student of men and motives. First, that idealism and the sensing of the plan for humanity have a close relationship. Idealism is analogous to the thought that precedes creation. The capacity for abstract thought and for concentration on the ideal is only now in process of development, for this capacity involves the utilization of certain atoms, the employment of matter of the higher subplanes, and the ability to synchronize one's vibrations with the great ones. Only a few people in the race are true idealists, although their numbers are increasing. The small minority only employ the concrete mind, while the masses are swayed entirely by emotions. The time is coming when the intuitional body, the Buddhic vehicle, will be organized, utilizing the higher spiritual mind as its medium. And in Physics of Consciousness, he talks about the signal and the noise, and how we operate on a very small amount of signal, proportionately to our consciousness that we use. Because he said, if you were able to operate on 100% signal, every thought you have would be the way things were at that instant. I see you thinking there, Tom. Because the will would be putting things exactly the way you thought them at any given instant, which thank goodness we don't have it, because if all of mankind each had it, I mean, this thing would be changing like a kaleidoscope on steroids.
No.
Okay. Instead, we are all collapsing to the same version at every instant. of the what is. So the planet, for the most part, appears certainly physically exactly the same. You know, until there's a storm or a flood or something. But the point is, the mountains are still where the mountains were last, you know,
Right.
last, so on and so forth. And in fact, it's why I think sometimes I know a few remote viewers, and they're given a code or a set of numbers or something to that effect, and then supposed to describe a diagram about them and what they come up with. And evidently they usually come up with the same thing, which they should, if what this guy's talking about in terms of consciousness. It would have to be, if that's what that represents, then they would all have to come up with the same item, right? So it's either a self-confirming prophecy by doing it that way, or it's valid. And I'm not sure what the answer is to that. So the time is coming when the intuitional body, the Buddhic vehicle, and this is the one where he says that Buddhic vehicle, that intuitional body, will not be sending you intuitional ideas about your daily living program and so on and so forth, because it's not interested in what's going on down here. When that organization is completed, the lower concrete mind will be nothing but a transmitter or an interpreter. And in other words, you're not going to be thinking. Because your thinking is generally keyed what to inductive reason. In other words, your thinking is involved now with reasoning. I'm watching Tom here.
Just trying to soak it all in.
Yeah, but when you think, what are you actually doing? The process. Inductive or deductive reasoning, aren't you, in a sense?
Yeah. Form of analysis, I guess.
Yeah. And basically what he's saying at that point, when you've shifted over here, abstract or concrete thought is superseded, and we simply have the flow of intuition taking form through the medium of the mind stuff. We shall therefore have the apprehension of much that is now incomprehensible to our lower plane vision. So in other words, you are not thinking anymore at that point. You are with the what is.
Hmm.
Okay, you're on the Buddhic plane. So, which is abstract thought, and abstract thought, I think when I looked it up, is the situation where you didn't have to deduce it. You just have the answer.
You just know it.
Yeah. And you repeat it. And that's why does make a statement somewhere. I don't think necessarily in this book, but that when you're functioning off the Buddhic plane, your information is infallible. And I would expect that, for example, you know how somebody will get a long list of some capacity, have the capacity, there's a long list of numbers, and they have the accurate computation instantaneously. Okay. If they're on the Buddhic plane, then what they've got is the answer. If you're on the lower mental plane, you've got the list looking for the answer. A little bit of food for thought there.
A lot of food for thought.
So what are you thinking, Donnie?
And that'd take a little getting used to.
Yeah.
Actually,
Or,
with the
or it just is.
yeah,
Right.
actually with the shift, I don't think it takes much time getting used to if you've actually made the shift.
Right.
You just don't think anymore.
Right.
I mean, you'll look at something, you'll see that what it is, and that's it. But the other thing is you're not plugged into that astral plane either anymore.
Hmm.
So you will look at something and see it as what is,
Mm.
but you're probably not going gaga over it. Because you're not making an evaluation. You see, when you're down on these lower planes, you're constantly making evaluations as to meaning and where you're putting this in your library catalog. Remember, you used to have library cards in the catalog way back when. You know, you're filling all those in of where this belongs in this whole scenario. And your evaluation of if it's good or it's not good or it's blah, 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 blah. None of that's happening because the things you used for evaluators, you're not plugged into anymore.
Hmm. Well, I'm certainly not operating on the Buddhic plane now because I'm evaluating this way too much. No, but I just had this thought. It's like, okay, so I take a walk and that's a tree. But that's not what we're talking about, right? Like just the tree. Like I see a tree, it's a tree. I mean, is that kind of what we're saying? And as
Well,
opposed to like,
let's make it a more
what kind of tree
composite.
is that? Or
No, well, let's make it an event with a little more composite components. Okay. That evaluates, say there's emotional stuff going on, whether it's plus or minus, doesn't matter which end it is, something. Somebody who's on that Buddhic plane will look at it and they'll see it, but they're not evaluating it in terms of right or wrong.
okay.
In that regard. They're not going to get emotionally involved in it because they're not emotionally in those realms anymore.
Okay.
They will just look at it. Okay, well, this is what this is. Okay. But they're not going down, up and down this roller coaster of emotions and determining this is good, that's bad, you
Trying to
know.
understand why. And,
Right. Yeah.
okay,
None of
what am I going to do next time to make it better? Just
right. Yeah.
okay, got it.
None of that stuff because they're
Like everything they make us do in the workplace. Well,
Yeah,
why did we
because-
make that mistake, and how are we going to fix it and not do it again? You know, so it's-
right. Yeah. And that's the valid activity level,
right.
that level. But on the Buddhic plane, you're now just getting the downloads off that spiritual triad,
Mhm.
which all of the etheric energy, which is not consciousness, by the way, he makes it very clear. So you're not operating in consciousness, which would do all the things you're saying. How are we going to make this better? Boo, 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 bah.
Mhm.
Because it's basically not interested in this down here, for starters. And it's interested in that connections that are component parts of us, but on a higher level that's past the soul level. Let's put it that way, because once you've moved up and are fully integrated in that soul destruction of the causal body has occurred, and your basic connection to those lower levels that way are gone. And your connections are now all the way up and up above. You may incarnate and then, or you may create what's called a Maya Varupa in order to function down here if you need it, either through an incarnation or creating a form that people can see for whatever time or space that you want, I guess. But the thinking, the thought patterns are not occurring there like we have here. So when you talk about the idealism and the sensing of the plan for humanity, they have a close relationship. That is the ideal, because the ideal is not restricted. In other words, like, for example, the planet Neptune, and idealism and fiction will run in under that category, for example. Movies run, so on and so forth. Because you are not, you haven't placed all the limitations on that realm. In fact, I think it was interesting, my grandkids, when they were younger, they must have been, I don't know, 7, 8 to 10. They would ask if that video was real or not. In other words, is this video of something that really happened, or is this video a movie or a cartoon? Or they were learning to distinguish between the two at that age. Obviously that wasn't happening when I was young, because we didn't have the alternatives we have now for the medium of things. But yeah, the Neptune, that energy can morph into anything. It is not bound, and it is not limited by cause and effect or anything else. Okay. And we have it. Everybody has a Neptune. Everybody has a 12th house. Everybody has the sign on one of its 12 houses placement, so that each of us is meant to bring in a little bit of idealism, because we're bringing in the future that way. And so but we are never really educated much as to the capacity of that kind of energy. So people use it, not realizing that it's not even limited by time. So they could be seeing in advance of advanced potential, but not the real potential of something. Okay. And generally they would give it a much better, positive, advanced potential than reality might be allowing them to see at this moment. It doesn't have time, it morphs, so you can use it and create anything you want to imagine. And they can be very, if they got a heavy dose of it in a chart in a given lifetime, they can be very unhappy people because they'll constantly be disappointed, because that idealism creates the most beautiful ideal you could ever imagine, no matter what the subject matter is or whatever. And then you go paste it on something, so to speak, that's tangible, and are looking for the expectation of that expressing itself, because you know it can be, because you've seen it and it's living and it's real within your mind. And when they don't produce it, you're disappointed, and you don't realize you projected that onto them, because there's no distinction of that going on in your brain. And you'll ditch the tangible item as being dysfunctional, but not your expectation. So they can be very disappointed in life if they're not understanding the process that's going on. Now, this works great for artists, musicians, probably filmmakers, anything that's not really real or has a wide berth in the category of realism. It's like a film has a pretty wide berth. Music has a pretty wide berth. Art has a pretty wide berth, what you can put on the screen. We have categories or time frames, like there's the Impressionists and there's this and there's that, as they move through our evolution, bringing it in slowly. But for the person who embodies a lot of it, life can be pretty difficult if they're not in one of those realms, or if they're not in the church, or there's a realm for that to seep into our society and gradually be incorporated. But if you've got a heavy dose of it and you're out there projecting stuff that isn't going to be normal for, I don't know, 200 years from now, or the expectations of a person, if you were going to see them, it'd be 3 or 4 lifetimes from now before they had that potential. You're really unhappy, and consequently Neptune transits can do the same thing. So we got Smiling Joe up above you, Tom.
Well, on my screen, he's actually below, but yeah, I know my good friend there has been playing with Neptune a bit lately.
Yeah, I think his family life hasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, we got it all out. It's all around me.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I recognize what you're saying.
Yeah, because it's and the transits, when they come by, generally just the difficulty with those is they dissolve things that are no longer needed in your life. They just dissolve it, and you can't put your finger on what's happening. You just know something is happening, but you've got no tangible, visible reason to imagine that. And it's so subtle that you don't, it takes you a long time to realize whatever is gone is gone. So, and you can't see the world in front of you for what it is either. So those transits, they work fairly well for people who are either in spirituality or an artist, a musician, or something like that, because they can create with that energy and create something unique and new. But for people who want to hold on to the life they have, and all of a sudden their whole energy pattern isn't conforming with that, it can be a challenge, because we get it basically in little doses. although, you know, we just had 2,000 years of the age of the Piscean age. Now we're moving into the Aquarian age. So we've just had 2,000 years of that kind of energy. And so our religion was founded on belief and hope and all of that intangible. And now the age of Aquarius comes along, which I believe in this regard will explain the fundamentals of that belief and why it works, and what it's about. So science will prove why Christianity works, not disprove it, is what's going to happen. Because it's going to deal with the upper levels of consciousness that we need to understand in order to make sense out of what just happened and what can happen going forward. So, contrary to,
Go meet the man carrying the water, right?
well, yeah, but you know how that goes. What is it? Before enlightenment, you chop wood and haul water. After enlightenment, you chop wood and haul water. And it's true. As long as you're, the thing is, you can incorporate and you could go through and have that enlightenment, but the enlightenment does not make the lower three worlds laws devoid. In other words, you could have the enlightenment and you want to wander off into space and give up your body. That's one thing. But if you are enlightened and you are maintaining a physical body, your physical body still has to function within the laws of the physical world. One does not devoid the other. The only devoid would be is when you get to that connecting that consciousness between your soul and your mind, and you collect that and you go forward. Yes, you can devoid the need for that physical body and you're still going to maintain your consciousness. And then you could move up into that realm of the spiritual triad, which is a formless world, but conscious and still absorbing information. But if you would reincarnate again here on this physical plane, even with that advanced level, if you're going to take a physical body and live in this lower realms, it does not devoid your function. You have to follow some of the laws for functionality. Okay. And I understand there's some people who walk through walls and all of that. I haven't been scared off by any of them yet because I haven't seen them come through the wall. But you know, basically, you're still, at whatever level you are consciously operating, you're going to follow those laws. You know, if you're up in those realms where it's just formless, you ain't taking your physical body up there because it wasn't going to function up there. Okay, so it's vice versa. I'm even saying either way. The Maya Virupa is something different that he talks about, that Kuthumi created a Maya Virupa. He created the form that, and in a sense, I imagine that's etheric. And so if you see those, if you can see in the etheric, then you would see that form. But anyway, that's as far as I can go technically, because I don't know anything beyond that. That would be just guessing anything beyond that. But Yeah, and that would be a situation where whatever entity that is wants to communicate with you. Okay. And may provide a etheric form that's visual, because you can see in the visual, the etheric at that point, even if it's for a moment or two or whatever. But there's a lot of imagination that has gone down along with and this information over time, that some of it's not accurate.
I think that would be totally natural because we don't know what we don't know. And we have very powerful imaginations and we want to know, but we can't. So we have to imagine, and then we build up this anticipation somehow, towards what we imagined and what we've heard, but even still, even having heard it, we still can't imagine it. So we have to
Right.
leave it, so there's a paradox. It's paradoxical there a little bit.
Yeah, it's stuck between two different realms.
Yeah. It's interesting stuff. I mean, we can't even imagine. I get it. I get that because I've had, downloads or whatever come that I could have never have imagined they were going to come the way that they did. And so I can only imagine that that's what the norm is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's incorporating stuff that's totally new.
And then for our friends, it's even hard, this conversation is totally crazy. Because we're talking about all these other rooms, and
Yeah. But they're there.
yeah, no doubt. No. Very cool.
Yeah, and it's a slow process. On the overall, it is a very slow process to move into these realms, and it should be, because it's well, fires burn. I think somebody got burned a while back here with a bolt or a jolt. Anybody raising their hand up there? Yeah, I mean, and what a shocker. And the burn is real, but I mean, it doesn't have heat like hot fire, but so you don't know it's coming until after the fact, but it's a burn.
It just kind of messes with your head a bit, or a lot. Is it more?
Answer that, Donnie.
I think it's intended to purify. Is that right?
When you tell me, you're the one who got it.
Well, I had a lot of purifying that needed done, and I know it kind of took some things away. It cleared out some nonsense, and I still, I still ask for it, and I think it's.
And I think that one was really a shock, wasn't it? When you got
Yeah.
hit.
Yeah, I didn't know. That was a real good one. But I think last November we had gotten burnt. So I got some burning, then too. And maybe some now. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a different kind of fire, but it is a fire. They call it a fire, and it is.
Yeah, I don't know if it. Yeah, I think it more so than anything. I think it took clears stuff out.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's what this kind of fire is for.
Hmm.
Because your whole system is built on a program, an etheric program anyway. And so if there's going to be any change, then that etheric program has to change. And one of the ways it gets changed is through the fires, the various kinds of fires that we have access to over the evolutionary time that we're in this system, which means eons of time. So,
It's like a whittling away, like
Like a slow, subtle burn, right? A little kindle fire.
well, here's one, the last one that I remember, he got literally, I won't say knocked up against a wall, but man, that thing I think came out and just hit him.
yeah, I still don't know that all, I don't know.
That one's not totally done yet anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was like a jolt, I think is the way, kind of the way you described it.
And knock you in to do a different place, I guess.
Maybe you're the kind of guy who needs to be knocked
I
around.
do, I need it. Knock me around, that's fine.
Probably are hard-headed, right?
Yep. Go ahead and go ahead. Hit me with your best shot. I'll take it. Yeah.
That's what resonates with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Nah, it's, you know, I want to say you can ask for it too. A little bit. I don't know. Maybe it's just coincidences. I don't know.
you see, and there's that part where I said you eventually, it's not tangible and you wonder, am I imagining it or is it real? Yeah, because you can't prove it anymore.
Right.
You know, you can prove the rock hit your foot,
Yeah.
kind of, because you can see this foot all swollen up and the rock is sitting right next to it. This kind of stuff you can't prove.
Well, and then from what I've read about, the later things that happen to people later, you can't even talk about it. There's nothing to say, right? There's nothing, you can't tell anybody.
You don't have
Right.
I mean, you're not forbidden to, you just have no words.
In
other words, so something comes along that's significant, whatever that is. How do you describe that to somebody else? And maybe the only way that you determine it's significant is because it's totally out of the realm of wherever you're functioning these days. But that has nothing to do with anything you could explain to anybody else, because most of it there's no words for. I mean, that's a way of not being able to talk about it, because well, you really sound like a nut. You start trying to talk about that stuff. Because it's not relative to anything that you can identify to explain to anybody. So.
Yeah, so at some point, I guess it just gets so strange that you just leave it be.
Yeah.
Have
Yeah.
to. I
Yeah.
would think, yeah.
Well, you just look at it and say, well, okay, that's what
There
that
it
is.
is. Yeah.
See, I was always somebody that would want to tell everybody, and I want to run around and tell everybody. That's just how I've always been. If I've got something, I want to share it, and anymore, it's like whatever. There's no point in that, you know.
Right. There is no point.
Yeah. So that's an interesting thing.
Does that make you any quieter than you used to be?
I think it does, actually. I would say
I don't know. Ask Tom.
At least temporarily it does. I know that.
Yeah. Maybe made you a little quieter. But you perk back up. You're never really quiet with me, so it doesn't matter.
No.
I'm a bad judge.
Yeah. Wild stuff, man.
Mm-hmm.
But by the same token, obviously something's happening. So in other words, there's a realness about it on some level.
Oh, on every level. Yeah, that's why I asked you this morning, where am I supposed to try to stand? Where am I supposed to try to stay at this juncture?
There's no answer to that. You take care of your, he does talk about, you take care of all of your duties that you have in this physical world, but what's going on in your mind isn't taking up any real substantial amount of time take away from hauling water and chopping wood. In other words, because the enlightenment is not really to make a better way to haul water or chop wood. That's not where the enlightenment is. The enlightenment is up on those formless levels, up in that other upper mental and beyond. So yeah, you're still going to chop water and sit on your lawnmower and mow the grass, because you're not going to be able to stop Mother Nature from growing grass.
Yeah. No kidding.
That's not your magic here.
No.
So
No. Yeah. Interesting stuff.
yeah, grinds down a little bit lower, so it's a little, I think it eventually it gets easier to understand.
Well, yeah, I think that makes sense. Things seem to continue to come together as you are helping us and explaining these things and putting them in context for us.
Sure.
And as we study.
Yeah, you just need to build the awareness, the conscious awareness in, and then it'll start to work,
I think, the interesting part is there's probably a lot of people hitting these places like and DK, I think, talks about it, and the intelligentsia, and they're hitting this, but they don't really
know what it is.
Yeah, they don't know what it is. So
I don't know what to
So
do.
now we're kind of hitting, and then to kind of know, and then to be able to differentiate, that's really important, I think,
Yeah.
to be able to put a finger on, hey, the difference between how what you're thinking about when you wake up first thing in the morning, and then when you bring yourself up higher, I guess, for lack of better words, and then you can stay there and then witness the things that bring you down, and then bring it so that you're witnessing this process and how it's happening in real time. It's and it's like, well, where do you try to stay at? I don't know. I don't know. Do you try to keep bringing the fire down? I don't know. I don't know how high, I don't know what, because it's interesting.
Yeah, well, there's no pro forma, okay, you do this, this, and this, because everybody's different. Everybody's got a different race structure. Okay, so everybody's experiences are a little bit different, unique to themselves. Other people, everybody's got different history over and throughout time. And you just kind of work it in, and to work it to a point where it works and it's doing something, so to speak. But you are here in this world, and you are going to do worldly things, because that's what you're here for. We're not hibernating. And you should be able to do your worldly things and do this too, because a lot of this is mental.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate. Tom does it. Tom has a job that requires his attention throughout the day.
Sometimes more so. Depends, but yeah, got to do it. I mean, I can't just let my normal responsibilities slip by. I've got to make sure I'm putting food on the table and making sure the kids are being raised right, and make sure Heidi's taken care of. So yeah. And then I make time for my personal enjoyments too. Play the ukulele or guitar and listen to music. So, but got to fit this in there too. So you just got to balance it all out.
So what does it give you when you do that?
What's that?
The whole thing. Why are you pursuing this?
Why am I pursuing this?
Yeah.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that. I just feel like it's the thing I need to be doing. I need to do it. I desire it.
Yeah, so that comes from within. Is that what we're talking
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Something within me has pushed me here. And now when some of this stuff happens, I don't necessarily feel like I'm going crazy anymore, because it's just a part of the process. So it's given me clarity. So, but yeah, it definitely comes from within. There's certainly nothing, well, I mean, getting fed up with what's going on externally, but now I don't really worry about that anymore. I just do what that needs to be done and how I think it should be done, and move on with the day and keep moving forward.
I don't know, Donnie, should we be asking you what's driving you? Do we really want to know?
I'm like a Polish paratrooper pushing forward at this point. That's it. The Polish paratrooper that I was. No, I don't know. You just wake up and I don't know. I don't know how that goes. This is what has to happen.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. The truth, I think, I don't know, maybe you just want the truth. You just have to know what's real at some point. You can't once you know that the stuff once you know it's not, a lot of this is not real, then you got to know what is real. I think it's,
Right.
and all you need is one glimpse of quiet to see that all the chatter is
That's just what it is. It's chatter.
chatter, you know. And
A lot of it's meant to distract us too. So
just get a glimpse, and there's nothing else. I don't know. It's all that there is. That's what's happening here, right? That's all that, I mean, it's the only thing important. This is this journey. Everything else is what, I guess, some necessary, I guess, some not necessary, but like, you got to have a job, you got to pay your bills, you have to mow the lawn, but I guess you don't have to mow the lawn.
but you should.
I think you do,
You should mow it. Well, it's not, whatever.
for the amount of lawn you have.
I'm trying to simplify this whole process. I'm leaving about 4 acres back there that I'm not going to mow anymore.
Till the fire department comes along and tells you you have to.
That's fine. I don't, because I got farms all around.
So you find a pack of coy dogs living back there in the tall grass.
I got turkeys back there right now. Big turkeys. That's kind of cool. Never saw them before.
Shall we wind up the taping?
Sure. Yeah, I can trim some of that last stuff off of there if you want.